In this video, we will learn more about looping, and in particular, we will look at how the for loop works. Let us look at the programming structures that we have learned thus far. When we first started programming, we looked at programs that had sequence. By sequence, we mean we had a statement in Python followed by another statement and then another and another, etc. And each statement was executed one after the other. That is what we meant by sequence. Our programs had some form of calculations, and in the calculations, we executed them one statement after the other, together with some output statements in it. After sequence, we then looked at conditions. With conditions, we had some statements, but at some point, we had a condition to execute. And based on the outcome of that condition, whether it was true, it followed one branch of statements, and if it was false, it followed another branch of statements. This was conditional, where we made use of the if statement. Now we're looking at repetition. Repetition is where we have these statements, and we then go back up and we execute the statements again. So this is in the form of a loop where we repeat statements. There are two types of repetition that we get. One is called fixed repetition. We know how many times the repetition is going to take place. And the other is conditional repetition, where we are not sure of how many times the repetition will execute. It stops when a particular condition is met. In this video, our focus is going to be on fixed repetition. In order to perform fixed repetition, we make use of the for loop. The for loop is used to perform repetition a fixed number of times. To do that, we use a keyword, for. We then use something called a counter variable. In this case, the counter variable is I. We have another keyword, in, and the next keyword is range. So there's many things happening here. Range has some values that are in the bracket, which we will discuss in a moment. And then we use the two dots, the colon, to indicate that there are now going to be statements that are inside of the for loop, just as we did with an if statement. So the for loop has this counter variable, and this counter variable takes on numbers that are generated by this range function. This range, it's a function, and it's used to give us a set of numbers. What numbers does it give us will depend on what we put inside of the bracket. When we use the range statement in a for loop, the counter variable, in this case, the counter variable is called I. That counter variable will take on the values that are generated by the range statement. So that is how the for loop is going to work. You should also take note that in this example, the variable I is used as the counter variable. However, you can call that any name. It does not have to be restricted to using the variable I. Let's look at some examples to better understand how the for loop works. In the first example, let's first understand if I now say range 5, what values are going to be generated by range 5? Range 5 will give me numbers starting from 0. It always starts from 0 and it stops one less than the number that's in the bracket. So when I say range 5, it will give me the numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 and stop there. So range 5 will generate numbers from 0 up to 4. How will this now work inside of a for loop? For I, that's my counter variable, for I in range 5, remember, range 5 is taking on those values, print hello. So this is the statement that is going to be repeated inside of the for loop. Now, how does that actually work? Let's look at a trace table to better understand how that works. I've got I, which is my counter variable, and output is going to come from the print statement. So when we start the loop, I starts at the first value. Keep in mind that range is giving us 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. One less than the value inside of the bracket. So what's the first value that I is going to take on? It's going to take on the 0. So I is going to have the value 0. And then you go into the for loop and execute the statement. Print hello, that's output. So that is going to print the word hello when I was 0. When you finished executing this statement, because it's a loop, you're going to go back up to the for loop, and the counter variable I is going to now take the next value in that range. And the next value in that range is 1. So I takes on the value 1 and the statement is executed. Print hello. So it's going to execute or output hello again. And then because it's a loop, it's going to go back up for I in range 5. So it's going to take on the next value, which is going to be 2. And it executes the statement. So I was 2 and it executes the statement. Hello. It goes back up to the for loop. I now takes on the next value, which is 3, and it's going to print hello. Finally, it's going to go back up. I is going to take on the value 4, and it's going to print. I has the value 4, and it is going to print hello. If it goes back up, there are no more values in the range. So once it reaches the last value, this for loop now comes to an end. So this is how the for loop works. This variable I, which is your counter variable, takes on each value that the range generates. And remember that the range generates values always starting from 0, and it stops one less than the value that is specified. And the statement, each time I takes on a value, the statement is inside of the loop is repeated. We could have had more than one statement. And if there was more than one statement, then all of these statements will execute each time I takes on a value. When I was 0, it will execute all the statements. I is 1, it'll execute all the statements, etc. So this is how the for loop works. Let's look at another example to reinforce our understanding. Well, before we look at another example, this is the same program that I looked at now. This is the coding that you would type in your editor, in your Python editor for I in range 5, print print hello. So that's the coding. And when you run it, once you click on run, it's then going to print hello. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It was 5 times. And remember, it did that for each of the values. When I was 0, I was 1, I was 2, I was 3, and I was 4. So that is how the program works. Let's look at that other example. So in this example, we are now having a range of 7. So with the range of 7, it's going to generate numbers that will give us numbers from 0 up to 6. Remember, it's 1 less than this value that is specified in the brackets. So the numbers that will be generated will start at 0, go all the way sequentially 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and stop when it reaches 6. If we use that now, there's range 7. And if we use that in a for loop, and notice I've changed my counter variable. I'm now calling it x for x in range 7. And the statement I'm executing is I'm printing hello. That's my message. And I'm also printing the value that x takes on each time the loop is going to repeat. So I'm printing hello plus the value of x is also being printed. So let's look at how this code will actually execute if we had to run it. So this is the statement that's repeated. What is the first value that x takes on in this range? The first value of x is 0. So let's put that down. X is 0. When x is 0, execute your statement. There's only one statement, and that's an output statement. So it's going to print hello. There it is. It's going to print hello. And then it's also going to print the value of x. In this case, x is 0, and it's converted into a string. So it's going to print hello 0. When that is finished, it's going to go back up, and x then takes on the next value. And the next value in that range is 1. So x now takes on the value 1. It's going to execute the statement again, which is hello. So it executes hello, and it's printing the value of x. And this time, x is 1. So it's going to print hello 1. Go back up, and x now takes on the next value in the range, which is 2. And it's going to print hello and the value of x, which is 2. I think you should be getting the idea now. We can go a lot faster. Go back up. X now takes on the value 3. It's going to come inside of the loop, execute the print, and it's going to say hello and the value of x, which is 3. Go back up. X now takes on the value 4. And it's going to come inside of the loop, and it's going to print hello and the value of x, which is 4. Go back up. X then takes on the value of 5. And it comes inside the loop, and it's going to print hello 5. Go back up. X takes on the value 6. It's going to print x takes on the value 6. It's going to print hello and the value of x, which is 6. Because our range was up to 7, it stops 1 less, and there are no more values for the loop to continue. And the loop then comes to an end. If there were any other statements outside of the loop, then those statements would then execute. So this is how you would execute a for loop using this particular code. If we had to type this code into online GDB, there it is. You've got your X in range 7, it's printing hello strx, and you will notice hello 0, hello 1, all the way up to hello X. So that is the code that we just did a trace for, and this is now typing the code in a Python editor, and this is the output that you will get. Let's look at another example, but this time round, in this example, we are now running a range. Our range is still the same, 7. And you should understand that if the range is 7, that means you're going to have values generated from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, stopping at 6, one less than the value specified. But this time round, inside of the loop, we are doing something else. It's not an output statement. If you look at it carefully, when you repeat a variable on both sides, that is called an accumulator. So I've got this accumulator sum, which is originally assigned to 0. There's a loop that executes, and then there is another statement that executes. Notice this statement is not indented. So this statement is not inside of the for loop. If you wanted this statement to be inside of the for loop, then you would have needed to have indented that statement. So the only statement here is the one statement, which is the accumulator that is inside of the loop. Let's see what happens in this example. In the first line, you always start at the first line, moving down. Sum is taking on the value 0. So we've got a variable sum, we've got a variable X, and we've got output. So in this trace table, I'm missing a column for sum, which I'm going to add in here, and sum takes on the value 0. That statement is executed once before now the loop is about to execute. So here is the loop. So this loop is going to run 7 times from 0 to 6, gives you 7. And it's going to start taking on each of the values. So the first value that it takes on is 0. So X is going to be 0. Sum equals sum, which is 0, plus X, which is 0. So sum still remains at 0. And we don't go to the next statement because I'm still busy inside of the loop. So I go back up, and now X takes on the value 1. So X has the value 1. I come inside of the loop. Sum equals sum, which is 0, plus X, which is 1. So 0 plus 1 gives me 1, and that result is stored back into sum. So sum now has the value 1. Back up, X takes on the value 2. X now has the value 2. And sum equals sum plus X, sum plus X. Sum is 1, X is 2, 2 plus 1 gives me 3, and the result is stored back in sum, which is 3. Go back up, X is now 3. Sum equals sum plus X. So 3 plus 3 is 6, and that is stored back. It's stored back in sum. When you strike the value, it means the value is now lost. So sum has the value 6. Go back up, X now becomes 4, the next value. That's 4. Sum equals, come inside of the loop, sum plus X. 6 plus 4 is 10, and that is stored back into sum. Go back up, X now becomes 5. Reaching the end, X is 5, sum plus X. X is first 5, sum plus X. 10 plus 5 is 15. So sum now has the value 15. Go back up, X now has the value 6. X has the value 6. Sum 15 plus 6 gives you 21. So go back up, there's no more values. There's no more values for X because it stops one before the number that you specify. In this case, it's 7, so it stopped at 6. The loop is now over, and you come out to the next statement, and it prints the sum is. So the output is going to say the sum is, and it's printing the value of sum, which is 21. So it's going to say the sum is 21. That is what will be displayed when we run that code. If we look at it, that's the code that we are running in online GDB. That's exactly the code that we just traced, x in range 7, sum equals sum plus x. Notice the indentation, which means only this sum accumulator is inside of the for loop. The other statement is not, the print. And if you look at the output, it says the sum is 21, which is what we had obtained. So in these examples, we looked at the range. We used the range statement, and we specified a number in the range statement. And the range statement generated values from 0 up to 1 less than the number. And when we use the range statement inside of a for loop, this loop counter variable that you can call any name you want to, just follow the rules of a variable, that takes on the values of each number generated in this range. And that will determine how many times the loop execute, how many times the loop will repeat itself. And each time the repetition takes place, it is executing that particular statement. And take note, you can have more than one statement like this inside of the loop that will be repeated. That can also be the case when you are working with a for loop. I hope this gives you a basic understanding of how the for loop works.